I sold the house without telling my husband, and now he's standing at the front door with his mistress while the blizzard rages outside. The temperature was -7 degrees Fahrenheit, a white nightmare that promised death to anyone left in the drifts. My husband, David, slammed his fist against the frame, his face purple with rage, while Sarah, the woman I once trusted as my assistant, stood behind him in the warm foyer, adjusting her silk scarf with a smirk. I was 8 months pregnant, and my hands steady as I held the one piece of paper that proved every asset, every bank account, and the title to this very roof belonged to me alone. I am 8 months pregnant, and my husband just threw me into a -7 degree Fahrenheit blizzard to die so he could move his mistress into our home. Some might call me heartless for what I did to them in return, but I call it justice. Is it morally wrong to leave a man to the cold when he showed you none? Or is this simply the price of his own greed? I want to know what you think. Drop your opinion in the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe so you don't miss how this plays out. David glared at me, his eyes wild. "You don't own this house, Clara. My father put it in our joint name." "Check the records, David," I whispered. My voice tightens. "You were so busy hiding your offshore accounts, you didn't notice I was the one who drafted the final transfer of title 3 days ago." Sarah leaned forward, her voice a sharp hiss from behind the safety of the glass. "He has the police on speed dial, Clara. You think you're smart, but you're just a pregnant woman who's about to freeze to death." I stepped closer to the glass door. "I'm not the one freezing, Sarah. I'm the one who paid off the mortgage company this morning, and they've already processed the eviction for the unauthorized occupants." David's arrogance had always been his blind spot. He lived for status, never realizing that my silence wasn't submission, it was the quiet preparation of a predator. He had spent years gaslighting me, making me feel small, but I was observing his patterns, his passwords, his hidden failures. Sarah was just the final piece of the puzzle. Her greed was a clumsy emotion that left tracks everywhere. I had tracked every cent he siphoned, every lie he told, and every secret meeting. He thought I was too tired from the pregnancy to notice, but the reality was that the baby gave me more motivation than I had ever had. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity, I was fighting for our future. David's phone vibrated. He looked at it, his face draining of color. "The account! It's zeroed out, everything!" "I told you," I said, with a quiet laugh. "You left me for a woman who only wanted your money. I guess you're both getting exactly what you deserve." David lunges for the door handle, but it's deadlocked. He pulls out a heavy brass candlestick from his bag. He brought a tool to break in. As he raises it to smash the glass, I don't move. I just watch him. I know exactly who is waiting for him in the shadows. He's frantic, looking at his phone, realizing he has no signal. He thinks he sees an escape route through the side gate, but he doesn't see the tripwire I set up, a silent alarm that triggers the sheriff's office automatically. I felt a strange sense of calm as the wind whipped around my coat. The house, which had once felt like a prison, now felt like a vault, and they were finally locked out of their illusions of grandeur. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every silver spoon, it was all legally mine. And watching them realize they had nothing left was the most satisfying moment of my life. As he raises the candlestick to smash the glass, the power to the entire house cuts out, leaving us in total, suffocating darkness. Before I reveal who cut the power, I need to know. If you were in my place, would you have left them to the blizzard, or would you have opened the door? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much. Let's go back to story. The blizzard howled, shaking the foundation of the estate where David and Sarah remained, trapped by their own greed. I slipped further into the -7 degree Fahrenheit wind that bit through my heavy parka. Every step was a struggle, my body heavy with the child I carried. I had to reach the main road, where Mr. Henderson's cottage sat, tucked away in the trees. The snow was knee-deep, a white ocean that threatened to pull me under. My breathing was ragged, my lungs burning with a sharp, icy intake of air. each heartbeat felt like a hammer against my ribs. I had prepared for this moment for months, documenting every detail, making sure that when I finally walked away, I wouldn't have to look back. My legs felt like lead, and the cold was beginning to seep into my bones, but I pushed forward. The path was treacherous, but I knew every inch of the woods surrounding the estate. Just as I reached the gate, a pair of headlights cut through the whiteout. It was Mr. Henderson's vintage truck. He pulled over, his face etched with worry. "Child, what are you doing out here?" he shouted over the wind. As I climbed into the cab, I looked back at the house. David and Sarah were visible through the living room window, frantically searching for the hard drive I'd removed days ago. "They think they're still winning," I whispered, voice shaking. Mr. Henderson had been my father-in-law's right-hand man for 40 years. He knew David's secret history better than anyone. When David's father passed away, he hadn't trusted David with the estate. He had trusted me. He had left me the keys, the power of attorney, and the knowledge of every hidden failure. Henderson had hidden me in his cottage for weeks, acting as my bridge to the legal world, helping me move the assets before David could touch them. He had been a silent guardian, providing me with the safety and resources I needed to dismantle David's empire without him even knowing it was happening. He didn't do it out of pity, he did it out of respect for his old friend's true wishes. He knew that David would destroy the legacy in a matter of months, and he was determined to stop that from happening at all costs. Mr. Henderson gritted his teeth. "Not for long. I have the papers you asked me to keep safe." The truck's heaters were struggling to beat the chill, but it felt like paradise compared to the outside. My fingers were finally beginning to thaw, though the numbness in my toes remained. I looked at the legal documents in Henderson's lap. They were the final divorce decree and the total asset forfeiture orders. David had been living on borrowed time and borrowed money. He had taken out massive personal loans against the house, which was now legally mine. When the banks came to collect, they wouldn't find David, they would find an eviction notice and a mountain of legal liability that would bury him for years. I had spent hours studying the tax codes and the corporate bylaws to ensure that David had no legal recourse. Every signature was authenticated, and every transfer was transparent. He had been so focused on his affair that he had let the foundation of his entire life crumble. Mr. Henderson pulls the truck onto the main road, but the road is blocked, not by snow, but by David's car. He didn't just throw me out, he followed me. He's standing in the middle of the road, and he's not alone. If you're enjoying how the tables are turning, please share your opinion in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to the channel. I promise the final showdown is worth the wait. The man David hired, a debt collector named Miller, laughed, a dry, humorless sound as he stepped toward the truck. "Clara, get out of the car," David shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of entitlement and genuine panic. He sounded desperate, but not for my safety. He was desperate for the bag I held, the one containing the physical copies of the forensic accounting reports. He didn't care about my pregnancy. He didn't care that the frigid air was making it hard for me to breathe. He only cared about the documents that ensured his financial survival. He was so blinded by his own selfishness that he didn't realize Miller, a professional known for his lack of morals, was already looking at David with open disdain. I rolled down the window, the icy air rushing into the cab. "You wanted me out in the cold, David. You got your wish. Now I'm the one holding the heater." "I'll make it right," he whispered, his voice tighten. "Sarah will leave, I promise. Just give me the signature for the inheritance transfer." Miller looked at David, then at me, then at Henderson, who sat stoically behind the wheel. The collector was evaluating the situation, calculating his payout. He didn't want to get involved in a high-profile domestic mess if it meant getting caught up in a legal trap that could cost him his own license.
He knew that the moment he saw the official embossed seal on my papers, he realized that David was a sinking ship. He had been promised a cut of the inheritance, but there was no inheritance left to take. I watched as he slowly backed away, his hand drifting toward his car door. He was smart enough to know when to cut his losses. David was suddenly alone in the middle of the blizzard with no leverage, no money, and no help. The collector's abandonment was the first real crack in David's armor. He had always relied on intimidation to get his way, but intimidation doesn't work when the other person knows you're bankrupt. I took a deep breath, feeling the baby kick, and forced myself to stay grounded. You spent all our savings on that apartment for Sarah, I continued, watching his face pale. You thought I didn't know about the shell companies? You thought you could move money around in the dark forever. Every wire transfer you authorized, every signature you forged, it's all logged. I have the digital trail and I have the physical receipts. David looked at me, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. The cold was clearly getting to him. His face was turning a shade of pale that bordered on blue. He reached out to touch the hood of the truck, but Mr. Henderson revved the engine, forcing him to stumble back. The realization hit him then. Not just the loss of the house or the money, but the total loss of his status. He was no longer the powerful executive. He was just a man caught in his own web of lies, and the winter wind was starting to feel like a judgment. I saw him glance at Sarah, who was watching from the porch. She wasn't rushing out to defend him. She was already calculating her own exit strategy. She knew he was a liability now. The psychological weight of that moment was palpable. David was looking for a partner, but he had surrounded himself with vultures, and now they were all circling him. I felt a surge of cold, calculated clarity. This wasn't about revenge in the sense of causing him pain. It was about the restoration of order. He had tried to rewrite my reality, and now he was being forced to live in the one he had created. I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt like I was finally waking up from a long, confusing nightmare. "There is no signature left to give," I said, my voice cold. "It was already transferred to my name, legally, before you even knew you were broke." David's face crumpled. He had spent his entire life bullying people, assuming that everyone would bow to his name, but his name meant nothing now. The banks were calling, the debt collectors were abandoning him, and his own mistress was waiting for him in a house that was no longer his. I had meticulously documented every threat, every instance of financial coercion, and every time he had put my health at risk during this pregnancy. It was all there in the bag I was holding. The evidence was overwhelming, and I had sent copies to the district attorney's office and the internal affairs of his firm. He wasn't just losing the house, he was losing everything that defined his identity. As I say this, David turns back toward the house. He sees Sarah running out carrying her own bags, leaving him to face me alone. He realizes he has nothing left, no mistress, no house, and no money. If you feel like justice is finally being served, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss the final revenge.
The storm broke by dawn. I was back at the estate, but David wasn't. He was sitting on the porch, his clothes frozen, waiting for a bus that wouldn't come for hours. I walked past him, the iron key in my hand, and locked the front door. The house was silent. The air was crisp and clean, purged of their toxicity. I walked through the halls, touching the walls, feeling the weight of the past lifting. The house was officially mine. I had the deed, the keys, and the peace of mind that only comes from knowing you've protected your future. The baby moved, a gentle kick, a reminder of why I had gone through all of this. It was a beautiful morning, the kind that made you believe that even the hardest winters eventually give way to spring. I sat in the sun, feeling the warmth on my face, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to look over my shoulder. I didn't look at him. I looked at the lawyer standing inside. "He's trespassing, officer." David's face fell. He looked at the police officer behind me who was holding a warrant for his arrest regarding the back taxes on the house. The house had always been David's ego, but now it felt like my own. I had spent so long trying to please a man who was incapable of love that I had forgotten what it felt like to be in control of my own life. I realized that my revenge wasn't just about taking the house, it was about reclaiming the time I had lost. David had taken years of my life, but he would never get another second of my attention. As he was led away, protesting his innocence, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt nothing. He was just a small man who had lost his game. The lawyer handed me a stack of papers, confirming the final dissolution of the marital assets. Everything was in order, and every account was secured. "But she's the one who sold it," David screamed. The officer looked at him with indifference. He had seen hundreds of men like David, men who thought they were kings until the walls came down. He handcuffed him without a word and led him toward the patrol car. Sarah had long since vanished, likely already looking for her next target. I didn't care where she went. She was yesterday's problem. I felt a profound sense of gratitude to Mr. Henderson and to my late father-in-law for giving me the strength and the tools to save myself and my child. I had successfully navigated the storm, and now I could begin building a life on my own terms. I walked into the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. It felt trivial, yet significant. A simple, everyday act that I had been denied the right to enjoy in peace for too long. David's influence had been like a permanent gray cloud over every room, but as I sipped the tea, the sunlight hitting the kitchen counter felt brighter than it ever had. I went back to the living room and gathered the last few items David had left behind. A collection of expensive ties he had bought on credit, a few designer watches that were likely counterfeit, and a stack of business cards that represented a career built on thin air. It was all junk, really. It was all a hollow representation of a life he never actually possessed. I looked out the window and saw the neighbors watching from their driveways. They had seen David's arrogance for years, the way he would parade his success while treating everyone else as if they were invisible. They wouldn't know the full details, but they would know that the reign of the king of the suburb was over. I wasn't doing this for their approval, but it was nice to see that the world was finally catching up to the truth. I began to box up the remainder of his things. I didn't want a single trace of his presence left in the house by the time the cleaning crew arrived. Every book, every coat, every misplaced shoe. It was all going to charity or the trash. I wanted to sanitize the space, to scrub away the residue of his manipulation until it felt like a home again. The process was therapeutic. With every box I taped shut, I felt a layer of my own internal armor begin to shed. I wasn't just a victim who had escaped. I was the architect of my own rescue. I found his old journal tucked under the bed, a book full of plans for his next big move, all of which were predicated on the assumption that I would never wake up. Reading it was the final closure I needed. It was written by a man who didn't exist, a character in a tragedy that I decided to end. I dropped the journal into the shredder and watched it turn into confetti. The past was gone, shredded and discarded. The officer ignores him and points to me. "Ma'am, the house is officially yours, and I have a message from your father-in-law's estate. He knew about David's true nature all along." He pulled a final sealed envelope from his pocket, a letter that was dated the day before his passing, explicitly warning me of the betrayal that would eventually come. Thank you for being part of this journey. What is the most important lesson you take away from the story? Share your opinion in the comments, hit the like button, and make sure you're subscribed so we can walk through the next story together.